You've been lied to about the glory of Rome. We're told Roman soldiers were rewarded heroes, that after decades of brutal campaigns, they returned home to gold, farmland, and honor. But for thousands of Roman veterans, the truth was far darker. After 25 years of killing for the empire, many were simply discarded. No land, no gold, no future. Some of these men, the very soldiers who conquered half the ancient world, ended up begging in the streets of Rome. Others joined the armies of ambitious generals who promised them the rewards the state had refused to give. And in one of the darkest twists in Roman history, abandoned veterans would eventually help destroy the very republic they once fought to defend. Because when Rome broke its promise to its soldiers, those soldiers stopped fighting for Rome. This is the brutal fate of the Roman legionaries who survived decades of war, only to be abandoned by the empire they bled for. To understand how this happened, we have to begin with the contract every Roman soldier made with the state. During the Roman Empire, a legionary usually served 25 years. Most recruits joined in their late teens, meaning they would not leave the army until their 40s. In exchange for this lifetime of service, Rome promised something incredibly valuable: land. At the end of their service, a soldier was supposed to receive a plot of farmland or a large cash payment, known as a premium. For the poor citizens who filled the ranks of Rome's army, this promise meant everything. Most legionaries came from the rural underclass, small farmers, laborers, or young men who owned no land at all. Life in the countryside was uncertain, and many families lived only one failed harvest away from starvation. The army offered something they could never secure on their own: food, regular pay, and the promise that if they survived long enough, they could retire as landowners. But Rome's military system relied on something darker than patriotism. It relied on poverty. The Roman state effectively weaponized the desperation of poor citizens to build one of the most powerful professional armies the ancient world had ever seen. Young men signed these contracts because they had few other options, and once they joined, they belonged to Rome. Life inside the Roman army was relentless. Legionaries marched 20 to 30 kilometers a day, carrying equipment that could weigh more than 40 kilograms. Every evening, regardless of how exhausted they were, soldiers were expected to build a fortified camp. They dug trenches, raised defensive walls, and planted sharpened wooden stakes around the perimeter. This happened every single night, even during long campaigns. Training was just as brutal. Soldiers practiced with wooden swords and shields deliberately made heavier than real weapons, forcing their bodies to become stronger and faster than their enemies. The goal was simple: create soldiers who could endure anything. But training was only the beginning. Roman veterans spent decades fighting across the empire, in the cold marshes of Britain, the forests of Germania, the deserts of the Middle East, and the mountains of Spain. Roman warfare was brutal and personal. Combat happened at arm's length, steel blades crashing against shields, soldiers pushing forward in tight formations where survival depended on the strength and discipline of the men beside them. For years, legionaries watched friends die in foreign lands. They endured wounds, disease, exhaustion, and relentless discipline. And if a unit failed in battle, punishment could be just as terrifying as the enemy. Roman commanders sometimes used decimation, executing 1 out of every 10 soldiers chosen by lottery, killed by their own comrades as punishment for cowardice or failure. By the time a legionary finished 25 years of service, he had survived a lifetime of violence. But before we continue, a quick pause. If you enjoy uncovering the darker realities of Roman history, consider subscribing to the channel. And I'm curious about something. Do you think a soldier who survived 25 years of war deserved land for his service? Or did Rome owe them nothing? Let me know in the comments. Because for many Roman veterans, the promise they fought for would soon collapse. The only thing that kept many soldiers going through years of hardship was the belief that a reward waited at the end. A farm, a home, a peaceful life after decades of war. The Roman government even planned entire veteran colonies across the empire. These settlements served two purposes. First, they rewarded soldiers with land. Second, they planted loyal Roman citizens in newly conquered territories, helping stabilize the frontiers and spread Roman culture far beyond Italy. But there was one enormous problem. Rome did not always have enough land to give away. As wars expanded and the army grew larger, thousands of soldiers completed their service at the same time. And suddenly, the system began to break down. This crisis became especially severe during the final centuries of the Roman Republic. After massive wars in Spain, Greece, and North Africa, huge numbers of veterans returned to Italy expecting the land they had been promised. But the Roman Senate often refused to distribute it. Why? Because much of Italy's farmland had been taken over by wealthy elites who controlled vast agricultural estates known as latifundia. These powerful landowners had no intention of surrendering their property. As a result, thousands of veterans were left waiting. Months turned into years. Some soldiers never received land at all. Instead, many drifted into poverty. After decades in the army, they had no trade, no savings, and no support network. Rome had trained them to be professional soldiers, but it had not prepared them to live any other life. This betrayal created one of the most dangerous political forces in Roman history. Disgruntled veterans, ambitious generals quickly realized something important. If the Senate refused to reward the soldiers, the generals could do it themselves. Men like Gaius Marius, Sulla, and later Julius Caesar began promising land and wealth directly to their troops. Suddenly, the loyalty of the Roman army changed. Soldiers no longer fought for the Roman state. They fought for the general who could guarantee their future. This shift would reshape Roman history. Armies marched on Rome itself. Civil wars erupted across the Republic. And the political system that had ruled Rome for centuries slowly collapsed under the weight of competing generals backed by loyal veteran armies. In many ways, Rome's failure to care for its soldiers helped destroy the Republic itself. When Augustus, Rome's first emperor, finally took control, he understood just how dangerous this problem had become. Abandoned veterans could topple governments. So Augustus introduced major reforms. He created a military treasury known as the Aerarium Militare, a special fund designed specifically to pay retirement bonuses to soldiers.
Instead of always receiving farmland, veterans could now receive large cash payments. This reform helped stabilize the system. But even under the empire, life after service was not easy. After decades of warfare, many soldiers returned home injured. Some carried permanent scars. Others struggled to adapt to peaceful life. They had spent most of their adult lives inside the army. The world they returned to often felt unfamiliar. Parents had died, families had moved away. The farms they once worked as children had been sold or absorbed by massive estates. Some veterans managed to build new lives, but many struggled to find their place. When we imagine the power of Rome, we picture triumphal parades, victorious generals, and unstoppable legions marching across the ancient world. But behind that image stood thousands of men who paid the true cost of empire. They conquered lands across 3 continents. They defended Rome's borders for decades. And they carried the scars of those wars long after the battles were over. For many Roman veterans, the greatest battle did not happen on the battlefield. It began when the war finally ended, because sometimes the empire they fought for had already moved on without them. and the men who built Rome's greatest victories were left to face the brutal reality of life after war, alone.